Welcome to the Char Chit Chat, a podcast exploring all things biochar related, coming to you from a small sheep and tree farm in the deep south of New Zealand. All right, thank you for joining me today. I'd like to start off by asking, who is Matt Welton?
Yeah, thank you, Dylan. Thank you for the invitation to be part of your podcast. Who is Matt Welton? Question I keep asking myself, actually. Fingers in a lot of pies. I spent most of my working life working around land, resources and systems, both on the ground and on the map. Most recently, I was in the hydraulic industry, and that took me to active forestry sites, etc., where I saw the scale of material just been left behind. But I have a cartographic background, trained in the UK as a cartographer, and that took me around the world, mapping various projects. The seabed was a main one. I worked as a cartographer for the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization in Somalia, and was out there in 1991 and onwards. When I left school, I actually became a scrap metal dealer and worked for a scrapyard in the East End of London. And so, in essence, really that idea of recycling and using a material that was deemed waste has sort of been in my kaupapa, as it were, for many years. And I just always looking at ways of reusing materials that most people would just throw away. And that's really how it's led me down this rabbit hole to doing what I'm doing at the moment with the biochar.
Okay. You came from overseas. When did you arrive in New Zealand?
I arrived in New Zealand in 2005 via Australia, Western Australia. I was originally from Newcastle upon Tyne in the northeast of England, and I have travelled south ever since. So through rural Cheshire as a young teenager, where I worked on a dairy farm after school and before school and at weekends and haymaking, etc. So that love of the land as was sort of integrated in me then. And then as opportunities arose, managed to move down to London, and then did lots of travelling overseas, and then decided at 25 I needed to actually try and get the formal qualification. So I trained as a cartographer, and that qualification and the contacts that I made whilst doing that course then set me away on the adventures I've been on ever since.
And when you moved to New Zealand, which part did you settle in, and where are you now?
So at the moment, I'm in a valley called the Akataroa Valley, which runs from the Hutt Valley just north of Wellington through to the Kapiti Coast and the town of Waikanai. So I'm literally halfway along that particular road from the Hutt Valley to Waikanai. I live off grid, out in the bush, and rely on wind and solar for our power and firewood for our heating and cooking and hot water. And we've been doing that now, me and my partner, for near on 15 years.
Okay, yeah. Great. Thank you for your introduction. Can you tell us what you remember about when biochar first came into your awareness?
So we bought this block of land, 200 hectares of land, which was a mixture of radiata pine, which was planted as a crop, and native bush. The radiata pine was coming up to harvest period, been in the ground for 25 to 30 years, time for it to be harvested. And when the loggers came to take the pine away, I was absolutely shocked by the waste that was left behind. Almost as much as they took away was left in piles to rot. So bit of research as to what I can do. We're trying to restore the land here. It was previously a sheep station, and 3 crops of pine ago, they decided to convert it into pine. And so we challenged ourselves really about converting the land back into usable agricultural land, and going down through various Google searches and rabbit holes and YouTube searches, I stumbled across biochar and its benefits. And I just wondered whether we could use it here to restore this land which had really been poached over 90 years of all its nutrients and goodness through the pines. Could we do something to actually put that back in the ground without having to rely on chemicals? That was my sort of foundation block, and I've gone on from there. My eyes have been totally opened by the ability for this material to change how the soil works and give it a new lease of life. This was really just a sandy, rocky, that rotten rock material. And now we've actually, over the last 8 years now, I've managed to get topsoil just through the application of biochar and using animals in the old hoof and tooth way that was done hundreds of years ago.
Yeah. Well, our scale was we're only 35 hectares, so you're 200 hectares. It's massive scale that people don't really comprehend, right?
The scale of it is enormous, and the length of time that they spend here harvesting the trees was just, towards the end of it, I was like, please hurry up and get it finished. Yes. But I think in retrospect, what I would like to have been more involved with the management side of it. We managed to keep the slash to the skid site areas, which was good, which meant it was easier access to clean up afterwards. Having said that, there's probably better ways of handling it. Through my hydraulic work, I've managed to see lots and lots of different crews working on different skid sites, and some are cleaner than others. A lot of them just throw the slash over the side and it goes down the hill. We managed to contain it, which was good, and that reduced the impact on the land and the mess and all that rotting slash. Another plus side was that land that was really inaccessible is now covered in tracks, which makes it easier for us to get around and enjoy the land. Walking, my partner's an ex-jockey, so she breaks in and pre-trains racehorses up here. And so now she's got tracks for Africa that she can use to get the horses fit. But the machinery is hard on your roads. The logging trucks do a lot of damage to your roads. So you're constantly reinforcing those roads and making sure that they can get in and out. I don't want to do it again. I've not replanted. Some of the easier areas we've turned back into paddock, and on the more inaccessible areas, we've let it regenerate back into native. And yes, you get gorse to start with, but once you get the wineberry, etc., growing above the gorse dies. As soon as it doesn't get the sun, gorse dies. And after about, I think we're now on about 8 years since harvest, the native is coming through really nice and strong. We've got Remu coming through, all the natives are starting to show, and the gorse is disappearing. On the areas that we're turning into paddock, as I said earlier, we're starting to get some marvellous topsoil. But it's not without hard work. And
because those areas you have to fence, right? If you want animals in them, you've got to put a fence around, don't you?
Yeah, so we fenced it off, the areas that we can use. We've created little pond areas to allow aquatic life and get those aquatic birds coming in as well. So that's quite nice. We've got a lot of springs on here, so we've opened up little streams that were virtually inaccessible because of the pine forest. We've opened them up, and it's amazing now the wildlife that is starting to come back. We're hearing the long-tailed cuckoo that started to use us. We've put part of the native back into, rather than touching it, we've put it into QE2 Trust to preserve it forever. And that's great to go for a walk through there and just notice the amount of the diversity of the flora and fauna that's over there. It really is quite uplifting.
Yeah. Oh, that's encouraging because we're on a similar journey. So we're also going to just leave the plantation areas to regenerate naturally. We're using the Hinawai model that we have from Banks Peninsula, and that's our inspiration. So it's good to hear that you guys are progressing well along that same thing. You're 6 years ahead of us. We've only been into it 2 years now. So yeah, it's great. Awesome.
Manuka and Kanuka, and we have certain areas that we've got quite a lot of toi that's come through. This is probably a coincidence, but one of our first paddocks that I broadcast biochar across it, didn't drill it in or anything, I just broadcast it. We never got gorse in that particular paddock. It was really strange. I don't know why, whether it made the grass stronger, or the gorse doesn't like the alkalinity or the acidity of the soil, or it's changed, so the gorse didn't want to grow there. But by applying the biochar early, we didn't get any gorse in that particular area. So
yeah, I mean, it could be if you put a spreading of char with seeds, and then the seeds germinated and got growing quite quickly. Nature just wants to cover itself, and often gorse is there. Gorse is also a real strong nitrogen fixer, so it's also adding fertility back. So maybe in that area there was already enough fertility, so maybe it wasn't needed, but probably because you added some cover on there. Yeah,
bit of that. And also I make my own liquid additives as well, seaweed tea. I utilize the horse manure as well to make a liquid, and then add that to the char. So it's certainly, you can see a difference, and every year we get more and more grass. And the animals, of course, the hoof and tooth, they're eating the char at the same time, then digest it, and then it comes out at the rear end. So it's sort of self-fertilizing.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, we haven't been able to do any biochar in those forestry blocks, basically just because we're setting up our life. We're doing, our own homestead and living area and growing gardens and fruit trees and stuff. And for me, I think it's okay for it just to naturally break down and feed the soil in place. Although some of those big piles don't seem to be degrading much at all yet. All that we've done is gone and spread some used mushroom bag spawn from oyster mushrooms. So we're hoping that maybe they'll colonize some of those big piles of wood brash. But the rest of it, I think it's okay to just decompose by itself. A lot of grasses and stuff have just kind of grown over it anyway. If you were going to talk to someone who had a forest and they were going to have it logged, and say, for example, there was a forestry company interested in making biochar, do you, now knowing what you know, do you think it could be feasible for them to set up their whole operation in such a way that they could be making biochar at the same time as they're doing the logging? Or perhaps when the logging's finished and it's dried out a bit, but could you see them kind of utilizing that slash and all the offcuts and stuff, and then having a usable product that is actually economically viable for them to do it that way?
Most definitely. That's the direction I'm taking going forwards. Yes, I'm clearing up my own block of land, but also I'm looking at other little enterprises. I've got a lot of close ties with a lot of logging crews, just through my previous work. I mean, they're going to be told to do something about the slash problem anyway, and so they're keen as mustard to try and get something sort of established before they're told to do it. And the biochar seems to tick a lot of boxes as far as they're concerned. They would need to just slightly change their practices as to how they process the tree before it goes to port, when they're cutting the logs to length and stripping the branches off, how they deal with that waste at that particular point. At the moment, they tend to just throw it over the side, but if we could encourage them to employ better practices, whether instead of chucking it left, they chuck it right and into a hook bin or something like that, that we could then contain it. And then once they've gone home for the night, we could go up at night and swap the bins over so we're not in their way, and then process it. Or we could take a portable biochar machine to site and follow up behind the loggers. So once they've moved to a different skid site, we move on to the first site, set up there and clean that up, and then just keep following them through the forestry blocks as they move around and clear the sites. There is definitely a way forward in looking at better harvesting practices and the way they deal with the waste. It's never been an issue for them, really. They just, it was just throw it over. We don't need it.
Yeah. So you don't see or foresee a problem with all of that offcuts being green? You think it's okay to biochar that once you've got the heat going, that the green of the wood is fine?
My personal experience, and I've just got a small batch pyrolysis kiln, is that yes, if you can dry it, you get a quicker product at the end. It's less time in the kiln. But even with my green waste with a high moisture content, I'm still able to convert it into biochar. Yes, it takes a bit longer, and I need to keep the heat going for longer in the kiln, but the process still works. So yeah, I mean, ideally, if you could chip it and have a continuous feed machine where the heat from the kiln pre-dries the chips before they enter the biochar kiln, then that's certainly a way to go, certainly a way to look at it.
Yeah, that would be ideal. Yeah, I agree.
If there is an ideal, that would be it. Continuous 24/7 auger fed through a pre-dryer, then into the biochar kiln, and then layer out.
And perhaps simplistic question would be, should it be the same company doing the logging, or should it be a completely separate company?
I think the loggers are very good at doing what they do, and a separate company coming in to deal with their waste product is the way I'm looking at it. It's they've got enough to do to get those logs out. There's a lot of pressures on them, timescales, etc., to get those logs to the docks.
So yeah, it would just have to be a legal framework worked out of, when the forestry guys have left, then the next company comes in and then they have responsibility of the site and they tidy it up and all that. Just have it legally separated, and everyone knows where they stand. And I would love to see somebody do a trial of that quite soon and see if it's economically feasible.
Well, fingers crossed. I've got something in the pipeline where I'm hoping that in the next 18 months we will be able to have that system operating.
Okay, awesome. All right, I'm going to go back to my standard questions just to guide us a little bit, and then we can always go back to the forestry stuff.
Yes.
If a stranger asks you what biochar is, what do you tell them?
Great question. And I have a little stall at our local farmers market in Brewtown and Upper Hutt, and I'm asked that question all the time. Most people look at it as being charcoal, and so for me that's not a bad place to start. It is basically charcoal, except I cook it hotter, and therefore I drive off more of those volatile organic compounds that the charcoal would hold. So charcoal is great for barbecuing because it's got those flavors, etc., in the timber. But the biochar process, it drives those compounds off. Those compounds are used to basically superheat the kiln and get it nice and hot. I take mine up to about 800 degrees. Charcoal is usually 300 to 400 degrees off the cuff. And so I'm getting a purer product than charcoal. But if you think of it like charcoal, but just cooked to be purer, that's generally how I try to explain it to them. And then I go on to say that if you look at it under a microscope, it's almost like a sponge full of tiny little holes, which then make little homes for all our microorganisms and gives it a massive surface area so that it can hold on to nutrients. And when you water your garden, etc., it holds on to that water. So it's not just draining away, and then the plants have got it when they need it. So if you add a liquid fertiliser like a seaweed tea, the char will hold on to that rather than just washing away in the next rainstorm. that's generally how I explain it. I talk about the fire triangle, and that if we take one of the elements away from the fire triangle, so we have a combustible material, a heat source, and oxygen to have fire. If we take away one of those elements, and in our case, oxygen, we don't actually have a burn, we have a cook. And so we're cooking the timber and turning it into biochar.
All right. Thank you for that. It's nice and clear. And besides what you've already talked about so far, what do you use biochar? Anything else that you use it for?
Yes. So I've been involved with quite a few little exciting projects, and one of the most exciting at the moment, I'm working with a clothing company in Wellington. I was introduced to them through Joni Griemer from the Good Carbon Farm. I'm one of her carbon biochar makers. We did some experiments using cutting room floor waste from their fashion studios. And this was pure organic cotton with nothing else, no zips, no elastic or whatever, and managed to turn that into biochar. And now they've mixed that with compost, and they're giving that away starting next year. When a customer buys an item of clothing, they'll get a small bag of biochar or compost enriched biochar to take away with them. That has then led on to a company in Auckland called Impetex, and they are a recycler of clothing. So they take in, for instance, old uniforms and overalls, etc. And one of their big waste streams is from companies that supply bed linen to hospitals, tablecloths, tea towels, etc. I've been able to convert that into biochar, and then through that, I've managed to secure the patent on a carbon negative oil spill kit. So it's a jute outer, or a sisal outer, which is waste that's come from the coffee bean and the cocoa bean industry. So when the coffee grinders buy in their coffee, it comes in these jute sacks. Same with the chocolate, when they're buying that in, the cocoa comes in these jute sacks, which then are basically, they're just sent to landfill. So we're using that as an outer, and then filling it with the cotton biochar and turning that into an oil spill kit, showing a lot of interest at the moment through British Petroleum, BP, and Z Energy. So we're still in the trial stages and working on the R&D of that. But instead of having a polycarbonate oil spill kit, we've now got a carbon negative, totally recyclable spill kit, and doesn't necessarily have to be used for oil. It can be used for any spills, whether it be milk spills on a farm. It can be used for waterway protection. There's thousands of different uses for it. So that, for me, is quite an exciting project that we're working on at the moment. Still very much embryonic, but we've got a few test samples out there, and getting on board Massey University to have a look at the R&D side of it for us and give us some exact figures as to its absorbency potential, etc. So that's really cool. Another waste stream that I've been looking at is the brewery waste. So Upper Hutt has a number of microbreweries in a place called Brewtown, which is an old tyre factory that's been converted and houses a number of breweries, one of whom is Panhead Brewery, part of the Lion Breweries. And I've been taking their brewery waste, their hops and yeast waste, before I came along, was just being flushed down the drain. So I take that on a Friday, centrifuge it, extract the liquid from it, which is very high in nitrogen. It's almost like a triple dose nitrogen, and turn that into a brewery waste tea. And then the solids that come out of it, the hops, then I turn into biochar. And then we can mix the two together at the end of that process. And again, another soil amendment from a different source. So I'm just obsessed, I think, with trying to stem all these waste streams and stop them going into landfill.
Yeah. How can I ask, how come the hops and yeast wasn't getting fed to animals, like to pigs or chickens? Or
the hops and the yeast isn't good for the animals, particularly cows, and so it wasn't being utilised. It was just being thrown down the drain. There are other brewery byproducts that are being used, such as the ones that make Marmite, etc., and the products, the barley that they're feeding to pigs. But this one, it's unfit for consumption by animals, I'm told. So they weren't utilising it; they were just throwing it away.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. So that product, you made a dry char and then you've added the liquid back to it. So you're selling it as a semi-liquid, like is it, I guess the char settles then, does it? Is it kind of solid on the bottom and liquid in the top?
So what I do is, so I extract all the liquid, I bottle that as a liquid enhancement, and I make the char from the solids that are left, and then I can do a 10% mix of liquid to char, so that there's just enough in the char. It doesn't make it sloppy, but it sort of pre-charges it before you put it in the ground. It's still quite easy to use. You can still broadcast it from your fert spreader. It doesn't clog, and yeah, it just goes straight on the ground, and the plants just absolutely seem to thrive on it.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, no, those sound like really cool projects. Very good.
Well, Mongaroa Farms, who's a local farm here, they've just bought two big farms in the Mongaroa Valley. Both were dairy farms, traditional dairy farming, lots of chemicals on the grass to fertilizers, etc., to keep the grass growing. So they're now moving over completely to organics, and they have used a lot of my biochar, both drilled into paddocks with the seed drill. They've planted Reboot as a mix of chicory, grasses, etc. in there. And so in the front box, it had the grass and chicory seeds. And then in the rear box, it had the biochar. So they're experimenting nicely with that. They grow a lot of vegetables, which they sell locally, and the farm in their own farm shop. So their market garden has been using a lot of the biochar in there. They want to start broadcasting it across all of the what were the dairy paddocks, and using it there to try and boost the land. And they're about to start logging as well, and they want me to set up a little biochar plant up there so that I can deal with their waste. So to show the circular economy.
Yeah,
they're really keen to have school parties coming through, working groups, community. They're very community orientated, so that'd be a great opportunity for me to help educate people about the benefits of biochar and how it can be useful in ridding the landscape of this the forestry / scar that is left.
yeah. And so are they going to continue the dairy farms as dairies? Are they converting them to regenerative dairies, or are they not doing the dairy at all anymore?
They're not doing dairy at all. They're doing beef and lamb.
Okay. And what is your favorite method of making biochar and why? So I'm really interested to hear more about this kiln of yours. I have seen some images of it, so I'm guessing you're going to talk about that. Please describe to people who haven't seen a photo of it what it's like and then how you use it.
Okay, so right at the very, very beginning, I started just with a pit in the ground and did basically a flame cap on the top and top down, reduced the oxygen, but not totally eliminated it. I just found that the char came out quite dirty. It still had rocks, etc., from pit, was getting into the char. And I wanted to try and get a cleaner system of cooking the material. And then a friend of mine had a charcoal business on the Kapiti coast, and he had an old charcoal oven that was surplus to his requirements. So I acquired that, needed some work doing to it. There was some cracks in it, etc. So a bit of welding involved and a bit of repair work, and got it up and running. So basically what I've got is two stainless steel drums. Each drum holds approximately 4 cubic meters of forestry slash. So I can cook 8 cubic meters at a time. There's a big door on front of each kiln, and once those doors are shut and sealed, 4 locking points, so to really get that door nice and tight, so there's no air or very, very little air can get into the actual cooking chamber. From that cooking chamber, so that we don't have an explosion because of the buildup of pressure inside, there is a vent, a one-way valve that will allow gases to escape but not to go back into the kiln. So it's a bit like a pressure cooker with the valve on the top of the pressure cooker, allowing the steam to escape. So that gas then comes off, and then in the middle, between the two stainless steel drums, I've got my furnace. Now, twice a week, I have a drive around in my truck, and I've got various businesses in Upper Hutt who are on board. They save me all their pallets, and I go and collect the pallets. So that's another waste stream. These are the broken ones, and the ones that the haulage firms won't take back, and the rotten ones, etc. So I take the pallets in, and that's my fuel for the kiln. So light a fire in the middle. It takes very, very little time because those pallets are so dry to get up to temperature. Once it starts cooking and we're getting up to sort of 300-400 degrees at the beginning, we start getting our volatile gases coming off the slash that's in the sealed drums. Those gases then superheat or turbocharge the furnace. Once that starts happening, I get a rapid rise in temperature up to between 600 and 800 degrees. Allow it to continue to gas off. Once I notice that there's no more gas coming out of the sealed stainless steel drums, I shut the furnace down, and then I just let it to cool off naturally, generally overnight. Open the kiln doors, and I have beautiful biochar, and it reduces its volume. So 8 cubic meters gives me approximately 2 cubic meters of char, and that's quite large blocks of char, but it's very, very brittle. So I made a ball mill using an old cement mixer and lots of steel pétanque balls. The French game of boule.
Yes.
Or pétanque. So I use those balls. Just bought a couple of pétanque kits from the local Rebel Sport, and those are that's my ball mill, and that crushes the char down. I then pass it through a 3/8 soil sieve. Anything that doesn't pass through just goes back in the mill until it can get through the sieve, and that's my finished product. Very
Nice.
very off-grid, very sort of bushman style.
Yeah, awesome.
I've actually got there's lifting hooks on it as well, so with a high-ab and a couple of chains, I can lift it onto a truck and move it to a different site. So it's a portable machine designed to move to the bush to make charcoal. Yeah, the only difference, I just cook it hotter.
Yeah, okay. Any idea what it weighs?
About 800 kg.
Oh, is that all? Okay, I
Yeah,
expected it to be much heavier. Okay.
I expect it to be about 3 or 4 tons when I saw it, but actually it's just a box. It's not like a solid piece of metal. It's just a box with stainless steel drums inside it. So there's actually not a lot of weight there. I would say a maximum a ton, but I think it's about 800 from memory. I know we had to weigh it when I had it delivered, so we could get the right truck size to bring it here.
Yeah. Sounds fun. I want one. And
it's hands-on and it's very dirty work. So
yeah,
but I enjoy that. It's all part of it, I think.
yeah. And when you put the textiles in, and then you open the door the next day when it's all done, I'm guessing they just crumble into a nice powder, and you don't have to do any of the cement mixer stuff at all.
It's just it's just a powder when it comes out. It's quite interesting, actually. Sometimes it looks like the tea towel that you put in there, but as soon as you pick it up, it just disintegrates into powder. Absolutely nothing. You'd need to add a liquid to it so it didn't blow away.
And are you going to do experiments to see what amount of plastics you can have in the textiles? Because I know what it's like when even if you have a pair of cotton jeans or trousers or whatever, that there often is elastic in the waste, and that it's often difficult to get every bit of that out. Do you think there's going to be a percentage that's allowable where it will burn off clean because it's so hot, or do you think it really does have to be really separated out?
Good question. and one we've already addressed. The biggest problem with clothing is the elastane, that sort of the elastic side of it. And so the Auckland company, they're cutting all the elastic out of all the garments that I get. We had it analysed previously, and we found that there was a definite proportion of the sample that was carrying arsenic, and that's coming directly through the elastane. So we've eliminated that altogether, and now we don't get any contaminants in the material at all.
Wow. So if you burn it with the elastane in it, then you get arsenic in the biochar.
Correct.
Wow.
And it's a trace element, but it's been enough of it to be a problem for agricultural use or food production. So I don't touch it.
If you've got 8 cubic meters, it adds up, right?
Yeah, and I just don't want a bar of any arsenic at all. I mean, there's people have asked me if I'd look at doing treated timber, boric or CCA. I'm just not interested. The arsenic content of it afterwards, because it's a base metal, it concentrates it in the char, and everything else gets driven off, and you're left with certainly with the CCA, you're left with your chromium, your copper, and your arsenic in the biochar. So until we can work out a way of removing those 3 metallic elements from the timber prior to cooking, I'm staying well clear of it, because a lot of my char is going into the food system, and a lot of it's going into growing flowers, and I just don't want any traces of any metals that can be of harm to any body or anything.
Okay. Why are you hooked by biochar? I think it's mostly obvious, but tell us in a couple of sentences, why are you hooked?
I'm hooked because I've seen the results on the ground of actually using it. And I did a podcast earlier in the year for flower growers of New Zealand, and a lady over in Martinborough, which is in the Wairarapa, tried some biochar. And she's a scientist, a university lecturer, etc., now retired, selling flowers. And she was going to do a trial. She did a trial bed, one with char and one without. The biochar was enhanced with my seaweed tea, and the other bed was just a normal soil. And she planted snapdragons. Now, I don't know much about flower growing or whatever, but she was absolutely gobsmacked by the difference. Both beds were planted on the same day, and she sent me a photograph about 2 months after she planted them, and she said you could literally see the difference. She said you could almost hear the plants growing in the bed with the biochar. The difference was that significant. Biochar bed, the snapdragons were more vibrant, they were greener, they were budding earlier. And then only about a month ago, she contacted me again and said, was I aware of an issue where plants were becoming more resistant to disease through using biochar? She was telling me that snapdragons are susceptible to rust. And the bed that was fed with biochar had no rust on. The bed with was full of rust. And the only thing I can put it down to is that those plants with the char are healthier, they're more resistant, and therefore they're not getting the rust. Which then led me on to think, well, garlic is another crop that is susceptible to rust. Yeah. I wonder if the garlic growers would be keen to trial it. And so I'm getting the same results with garlic growers now as well. They're finding that the garlic is more resistant to these diseases. Next to the beds that she grew the snapdragons on is willow, and willow is very, very susceptible to rust. Those willow trees that were able to get their roots underneath the flower bed with char, no rust. The ones adjacent, full of rust. So it's either a massive coincidence, or the biochar and the seaweed are giving those plants a better start in life, a healthier start, making them stronger and therefore more disease resistant. That's all I can put it down to. But that has convinced me that this stuff works.
Okay, cool. And how long has it been since you've been actively kind of putting your char out to the world and giving it away or selling it?
I started out probably on a part-time basis, 2023. working full time and looking at this waste problem. But recently I had an industrial accident, which meant I couldn't work full time. We already had the kiln. So I said, well, there's obviously, I need to do something. And so that was back in March this year. So since March 2025, I've been full on making biochar.
Okay. And is your market that you go to, is that your main outlet, or do you also sell biochar to other people in other ways?
My main market has been the wholesale market, selling it at 1,000-litre IBCs at a time. And that's been going to commercial horticulture. It's in, for instance, in the Horowhenua area, big grower of vegetables. Obviously, Mongaroa Farms is a big customer of mine. And then the flower growers, that's become a commercial side as well. But I thought that it's so good of a product that I need to start seeing whether the home flower grower, the home vegetable plot grower in his raised bed in the back garden, etc., would be interested. And I thought the easiest way for me to hit that market was to have a stall at the farmers market.
Yeah,
I've been doing that now for about 3 or 4 months, and again, that side of it has grown exponentially. I'm not selling it in the thousands of litres side. I bag it into 2, 5, 10 and 20 litre bags, and people can take a bit home to try it in their pot plants. They take it home to try with their strawberries. They're growing their tomatoes with it. So people, especially with the cost of living now, people are trying to look at different ways of growing their own veggies and to bridge the gap, and they're taking it on board, and they're absolutely loving it. It's amazing. And it seems to me that anything you put it on, it's like it has this Midas touch to it.
Yeah. Great. All right. Well, thank you for explaining so much why you're hooked. Yep, I'm hooked for many of the same reasons. Next question is, how is making and promoting biochar helping the earth? I think you've covered lots of that already, but anything else you want to add to that?
I think that what I'm trying to get the message across is that I'm not selling dirt. I'm trying to build soil, and biochar is giving that soil a bit more infrastructure. It's not like we're throwing chemical fertilizers into the ground. We're actually creating soil, and we've lost so much soil. The forestry it's a rape and pillage harvest, and it just leaves the ground so open and bare for so many years before everything starts coming back that your topsoil just blows away. We're almost creating our own dust bowl. And then if we can add the char to it and create more infrastructure, then therefore I believe that what I'm trying to do on a very, very small scale is that I'm building soil and closing those loops. That's how I feel anyway. Biochar is permanent. It's once it's in the ground, it's there. It's going to be there. It could be there next year. It's going to be there 10 years' time. It's not going to disappear. We're still going to. It's going to hold in the ground and be beneficial for generations to come. And I think that's the bit we've been missing in our soil practices over the last 100 years. We've not been looking. We've not been looking to the future generations. We've been looking for the here and now. Let's make a profit now and move on. But with a little investment now, I think we can help future generations. That's the crux of where I'm coming from, anyway.
Yeah, awesome. What's needed in New Zealand to make biochar a household topic?
I think there's a lot of scientific gobbledygook on Google about biochar. I think we need some plain language. I think we need a lot more on-farm demonstrations, such as that I do it. For instance, Mongaroa Farms, they're really pushing it. That's great. Just getting out there, being able to talk to people and show them what it looks like. I build a small-scale kiln out of an old oil drum that I take around with me, and I can show them how the process works on a very simple basis, and then encourage people to go and do it on their own back garden. I think we need to have more of a local supply, and councils are slowly waking up to it. I'm getting a bit of drive coming from council, both in my area here. I've got Lower Hutt and Upper Hutt City Council, and their waste minimisation teams are really keen in promoting what I'm doing. And as I mentioned earlier, the proof from the growers, rather than the theory. Come and have a look at it. It's visible and it's practical and it works. I think that's what's needed.
Cool. What do you know about the Biochar Network New Zealand?
My understanding is it's a really good growing network, and it's building education, and it's actually connecting with grassroots producers like myself and helping us to grow into a national network of growers. It can only help us at my level. I can't be everywhere. I'm only small. I'm doing my little bit. But with the Biochar network and getting out there and educating people and basically just doing what I've just mentioned, that's the great thing about the network. And that's what's really going to help get that message out there to government, to local authorities, and to the general public. You're our sounding board. I can come to you with ideas, and I may have an idea that you've already researched, and you can say, look, go away and have a look at this. This is what we've already achieved so far in that field. For me, it's almost like a library that I can step into and get information that I need, and a huge place for me to learn and gain experience from just by being part of the network.
All right. Working for the Biochar network, this is the most frustrating thing, is the government's just not helping our cause much at all.
Not at the moment, but I do think there's been a shift, and things are starting to turn slowly, but I think they're starting. It's like a big cargo ship. It takes a long time to slow down and turn around, but I think we're slowly getting there. As you say, the local benefits of it, the resilient soils, you're diverting waste, you're creating jobs. I don't know, it's a no-brainer for me, but I don't work for the government. But I do sense that they are starting to think now that it's less of a luxury and more of a necessity now to start looking at this.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll write a supporting blog post for every podcast that I do. And so I'm also going to link to some of your places.
The farm itself is called Gallops Ridge. We've set up a company here called Carbon Options.
Okay.
There's Carbon Options at Gallops Ridge.
Okay. Yep.
We are one of the carbon producers for the Good Carbon Farm, the charitable organisation. So we have made biochar for them, which they've given out to local communities and schools, etc., which is great.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you very much, Matt. I think we've covered quite a lot there, and it's been really interesting. You've got a lot going on, like you said, fingers and lots of pies. But yeah, super interesting. And yeah, keep up the good work.
Thank you, Dylan. I hope you've got enough there for your podcast.
Cheers for now.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. See you. Bye.
Bye.